leading up to January 24th. Do you recall, and can you tell the jurors what, if any, observations you made of Lindsay and her condition?
Lindsay had lost a lot of weight. She had become, during this whole time, paranoid about different things that really she shouldn't have, really weren't logical to become paranoid about.
And what we are seeing with the medication is a very clear pattern of a woman who cannot control herself. She is feeling overwhelmingly compelled to reach out time and time again to these doctors to such a degree that on one day at 7 a.m, she'll say, oh, I think I want to come off of all the medications altogether. And then by 4 o'clock, after about 6 back and forths with 2 or 3 different medical professionals, will then say, oh, you know what? I've decided to stick with the plan, whatever plan that was on that day. That's what we see when somebody is not able to conform their behavior to the implicit norms or agreements that our society has made.
These proceedings are here to see that justice is done. And justice is, as any reasonable person would tell you, the finding of the truth. Only we have a problem here.
Well, it is official. Jennifer Spray is the worst lawyer I have ever seen.
Now, you talked about a time when you went to her home and you actually ended up sleeping with her because she didn't want to be alone. Was that October 20th visit?
No.
When was that?
That was, I can't exactly remember when. I'm going to say probably sometime in November, the latter part of November, maybe the early part of December.
Did she tell you why she was afraid to be alone?
She just said she was afraid to be alone. And one reason, I believe, she said she didn't know if she was going to be able to sleep, but mainly she was afraid to be alone.
And at that point in time, did you consider having her committed to a psychiatric facility?
No.
And did you feel the need to call 911 that day or get her immediate assistance?
No.
Regardless of Zoloft, regardless of Benzedrine, regardless of whatever they took, it's going to be a situation where this woman was suffering from mental health, either a disorder or a defect. And there's no doubt in their mind by now that she had a mental health disorder or defect, that it was longstanding, and that she tried very hard to get treatment. It's an atmosphere that the prosecution put on, but the defense was able to create. Again, I don't know why the prosecution put on so many of these witnesses, because all it did was back up the defense that she had a mental defect or disease. And I think that atmosphere has been created. I don't think the jury has any doubt about it. And it's going to be, again, when we talked before about a split jury, there are some jurors that aren't going to care that she had a mental defect or disease. They're just going to look at these horrendous pictures. But the ones that are really looking, there's no doubt in their mind that it's been created right now, that burden, that ship has sailed because of the presentation of the prosecutor by putting on so many witnesses.
This actually makes the calculated decision that the way to highlight that Lindsay Clancy was fine through the month of January, or even before, is to point out all the times that Lindsay Clancy's mom did not have to be in the house with Lindsay Clancy.
You mentioned that in January, you saw her and she lost weight. She seemed paranoid about things, seemed to be going through the motions of each day. How often did you see her in January of 2023?
In January, I can't exactly remember how many times I saw her. We were, again, back and forth.
So we have Exhibit 238, which have all of your text messages with Lindsay in January of 2023. And I just want to go through some of them with you.
And the way that she would do this is point out all of the text messages where mom is reaching out to Lindsay to say, hey, honey, are you okay? How'd it go? How'd you do last night?
This is on January 4th, 2023, so the day before she was discharged from McLean. And she sent you a text stating, "Think I'm coming home tomorrow evening, exclamation point. I talked to the doctor and I made up a follow-up appointment with my other psychiatrist besides Rebecca for Friday morning. So she said she'd be okay with me leaving Thursday around 5. Do you remember getting those messages?
Yep.
And were you staying at the home helping out with the kids at that point?
Yes.
And did you go to Cora's birthday party on the 7th?
I did not. It was a children's party.
There's a text from Lindsay on January 7th, 2023 at 7:02 p.m. to you where it says, "Make it home okay," and you said, "Yep." Does that make sense that you would have gone home on the 7th after the birthday party?
Yes, if that's what the text says, yes.
And then on page 29, we have text messages between yourself and Lindsay on January 8th, where you ask how things are going today, and she says, "Good, going to the Science Museum." You say, "Great, that will be fun. Sleep good last night." And she said, "I actually did, with less Ativan, so that was good." Do you remember that?
I don't recall the exact text messages.
Do you recall her texting you about going to the Science Museum?
No, I don't recall that.
Do you think looking at them might help?
Sure.
Does that refresh your memory?
If that's what the text says, yes.
Page 34, you asked how the museum was today, and Lindsay sent you some photographs and said it was fun. The kids really liked it. Do you remember that?
I don't really recall the Museum of Science experience or text, but if they're there in the text messages, then they were sent, yes.
Okay. And then January 13th, again, you're checking in with her. "Hi, Lindsay, how are you today?" She said, "Hi, Mom, pretty good today. How about you?" And you asked about the little ones, and she said, "All good, went to the gym this morning, just hanging out, and now they have no school today." And then the following day, again, you're checking in. "Hi, Lindsay, how's your Saturday going?" She said, "Hi, Mom, it's going well, just hanging out. It's yucky here." So these are like daily check-ins that you're doing, checking in on her, seeing if she's okay, seeing if she's feeling better, seeing if she's sleeping well, things like that, right?
Yes.
And then on the 20th, you reach out, "Is it pizza and movie night?" She says, "Just pizza and playing." And you tell her you're leaving at 9, bringing dessert for the kids. And she says, "Sounds great." So you're talking about your visit that weekend. Is that right?
Yes.
What she's actually doing is showing us that Mom was in a pattern of being with Lindsay as much as she could. The second that she wasn't with Lindsay, she's either texting or calling to find out how Lindsay is doing, and then is back with Lindsay again.
In any of these texts prior to the visit, you say that it's been a while since you've seen them. So it sounds like from these texts, you're checking in with her every day from January 7th, 2023, all the way up to your visit on January 21st, 2023. You're checking in with her. So you're at home in Connecticut from the 7th until the 21st.
Correct.
What she winds up doing is showing us that Mom is hyper vigilant, that every single day that she's not with Lindsay, she's on top of her trying to figure out how she is doing. That she's with Lindsay through the 7th, leaves her for 2 weeks, and then is planning to be back with her on the 21st. So I'm not sure that this is showing us what she thinks it is. Because let's face it, it's really not normal to have our moms come and live with us to take care of us as adults. I mean, it's one thing if you have a newborn at home, and then my mom came for a couple of weeks, right, to help be a mom as I'm trying to get my shit together. In fact, my husband at the time literally cried as my mom walked out the door. He was crying. What are we going to do without her? So there you go, Mom. Not sure if you knew that, but he was literally crying. That door shut. She was strolling her suitcase out the door, and he just started crying because we knew we were in trouble. But that's normal, right? But that's not what's happening here. Now, I don't know if I want to get into this right now, but certainly it's not uncommon for people, once they make the decision to end their lives, that they're going to do that, for their mood to improve in that period between when they make the decision and then when they actually decide to take the act.
So the text was not necessarily what I actually observed that weekend, but it was meant to encourage her because I was encouraging her to do things with the kids to kind of try to get back to normal. So it's not necessarily a representation of exactly what I observed that weekend.
But that weekend, she was able to go to a friend's house with the older kids and Pat and spend a few hours there, correct?
Correct.
And she was able to do activities and hang out with you and your husband. There's a photograph and evidence of the two of you sitting on the couch smiling and hanging out together. So you were able to interact with her, correct?
Correct. The photograph was taken by Cora because Cora wanted to use my phone and take her picture. So Lindsay and I were going to put a smile on our face and let Cora take a picture. Yes. But again, there was other observations I made that weekend, but it was not, I didn't think it was in Lindsay's best interest to discourage her or point out those because she was making every attempt to feel better and to do things to make herself feel better. So as a mother, I was encouraging her.
Well, you didn't say, I hope you feel better, or you're going to get there, or you're doing it. You actually said, nice to see you doing better, correct? That's what you wrote?
Those were my encouraging words, yes.
And from January 7th up through January 22nd, Lindsay repeatedly told you she was doing okay, she was feeling a little bit better. Not completely better, not 100%, but she kept telling you, I feel a little bit better, I feel a little bit better. You even asked her, is the better you're feeling now better than a few weeks ago? And she said yes, correct?
That's correct without my observation of her.
And what she was responding to you in text, correct?
Correct.
Whenever I hear during this space and time in January that Lindsay's doing better, I can't help but wonder if some part of her hadn't already decided when she left McLean, I tried to get help. There's no use. It's just a matter of time now. In fact, I would not be surprised to learn that that is exactly what happened here. And that's why she doesn't have mom with her. And that's why she's not asking for help the way she once had been, because she's sort of giving up. Resigned to the fact that now it's just a matter of time and she has to figure out how she's going to execute. Now, I'm not saying that she had spent the month deciding what to do about the kids. I'm now speaking to her ending her own life. And that is what you see when we're talking about suicidal ideation, certainly not about homicidal ideation, which is an entirely different discussion. I'm quite certain that she did not spend the month thinking about how she was going to end her children. Having said that, one might think, because let's be honest, none of these people did anything wrong. This woman was a grandmother.
Tell us about Lindsay when she was a kid. Was she a good kid, good student, that type of thing?
She was a very good kid and an excellent student. Very excellent student all through school, through high school, college. Yes, excellent.
Ever been in trouble, law enforcement or schools or discipline or anything?
No.
Were you aware of her husband, Pat?
Yes.
And obviously, you knew when they got married, when they were dating and things of that nature, right? Went to the wedding, obviously.
Yes.
Fair to say that you were close to your daughter and Pat?
Yes.
And you knew, obviously, the grandchildren?
Yes.
Tell the jury how you interacted and felt about your grandchildren.
I loved my grandchildren with all my heart. You never know what it's like to love a grandchild until you become a grandmother. And it was the most beautiful thing. I love them with all my heart.
Now,
Who loved her daughter, loved her grandkids, loved her son-in-law, and was trying to do right by all of them. What the hell did she do wrong? She thought she had raised a superhero daughter. And up to that point, she kind of had. One fatal mistake that these prosecutors have made, and if and when they lose this case, I will tell you, this will be so significant.
I think the prosecutors have done a horrible job. For instance, what they really should have done in opening was, poor Patrick, ladies and gentlemen, we have to put this husband on the stand. We're sorry we have to do it, but he's going to fill in some gaps that we need to fill in. This is a tragedy. We feel terrible. There has been none of this sympathy or none of this coming from the prosecutors. They just look cold and unlikable, which is not what a prosecutor really should be. The jurors should look at a prosecutor as someone they have respect for. So they missed the boat on that.
Because all they would have had to have done is start each one of these cross-examinations or direct examinations with, "I'm so sorry for your tragic loss." But Not only do they not do that, they exhibit absolutely no empathy. They're called out by Reddington, at least Buckingham is, though not by name, for whispering, "Shut her up."
I want to tell you that they got picked up on a hot mic saying, "Shut her up," during the playing of that autopsy. This is not like Handmaid's Tale where you're going to tape them out.
So I'm not doing that at all.
Epic. It's like an epic, goes down in history as one of the all-time great moments in Massachusetts courtroom history. But it's Spray who is even worse, because she's the one who Lindsay's hysterical crying. She's not pausing while she's questioning witnesses. She doesn't miss a beat, doesn't think twice about trying to just bulldoze through whatever's happening while she's sobbing.
Was associated with additional red abrasions ranging from 1 to 2 millimeters in size, and on the back of her neck, the superior and inferior edges of the ligature furrow had developed some linear bruising as well.
And what do you mean by a furrow?
So again, the furrow is a ligature is when you have external compression by an object on the neck, and a furrow is simply a pattern of injury that occurs beneath it. It can be an imprint, it could be a pattern, or it could be more developed types of injuries such as bruising or abrasions.
And what about injuries?
All right, Counsel could.
Watch this again and watch how Ms. Spray hears the "I can't do this," and then just keeps talking until the judge has to stop her.
And what about injuries?
All right, Counsel could. We're going to take a break this time.
I have to say that one person whose opinion I tend to trust and value highly, because I've been at this now for a while, and I look forward to hearing his opinion on these cases, is George Tragos, Peter Tragos' father.
The other thing they've missed the boat on is by the time they get to, we're 3 weeks into the trial. By the time you get to 3 weeks, the jury should know what the prosecutor's theory is. They should know what the prosecutors really want, where the evidence fits in. In that opening statement, they should have said, we're going to put on these law enforcement experts, and they're going to testify to this because this proves that. And then we're going to put on the mental health people. They're going to tell you da, 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 da. And when they tell you that, because it's going to show that she is criminally responsible. She might have a mental defect or a mental disease, but she is responsible. And because of the testimony we're going to put on, so that when the jury gets to this point, they say, aha, the prosecutors were right. This is all fitting into place exactly as the prosecutors said it would.
And coming in today, we had gotten rumblings that the DA was going to be at the end of their case in chief. But I have to say, after the testimony of Sir Ian Whiffen, which to me was an absolute nothing burger, just completely irrelevant, totally meaningless. In fact, I think in the end, it's possible that Reddington actually used Ian Whiffen to bolster his argument more than that Ian Whiffen helped the DA when all was said and done.
The concept of location data, right?
Correct.
And location data, one of the things you looked at or you're aware of would be from Lindsay's phone on August 23rd of 2022. Is that correct?
Apologies, August 23rd, 2022?
Yeah.
I didn't go back
Okay.
anywhere near that date.
You have tested and written blogs, though, on location information, right?
Correct.
You actually testified in the case of Commonwealth versus Victor Arrington in Suffolk Superior Court in Boston in support of the accuracy of this particular artifact or information, right?
Correct.
So you're a true believer that the phone does, in fact, record accurately significant locations on the iPhone, right?
It certainly can, yes.
All right. And are you aware, or if I was to approach you in your expertise, you were talking earlier about latitude, longitude, things of that nature, right?
Yes.
So just to, you're familiar with, for example, significant location visits on Lindsay's phone August 23rd, 2022 at 9:34. Do you know what that says or what that means?
The created time
Yeah.
of 9:34. That'd be when the device decided that the device had visited this location enough to consider it a visit.
Okay. Do you know what that location is? If I suggest to you it's a doctor's office, would you be aware of that?
I don't recognize it from the coordinates.
And then began the defense's case in chief. So first, we had what we are used to seeing once the district attorney wraps up their case.
So the Commonwealth having rested Mr. Reddington, does the defendant have a motion?
Yes, Your Honor. I passed it up to the court. I don't know if you have it in front of you. It's basically a Rule 25. It doesn't have any memoranda with it, but I would argue, and I would cite to the court the case that was decided of Commonwealth versus Brunette Silvera. It's BRUNETTE-SELVEIRA. It was decided towards the end of May of 26 by the appeals court in Massachusetts. It was a case out of the Boston Municipal Court where defendant was charged with assault and battery on a police officer. The evidence was presented that the defendant was acting erratically and that there was an awful lot of evidence that indicated that, brought out on cross-examination from witnesses, that the defendant was suffering from some type of a mental illness. Based on that evidence being presented, the government rested their case, just as they've done here. My suggestion to the court is that the evidence that's been presented on this case against Ms. Clancy I would suggest does not rise to the level under Rule 25 of where, even if you take the Lattimore standard and determine that the evidence would be decided in the light most favorable to the government at this stage of the case, I think the Brunette Silvera case places, as they describe it, a negative obligation to prove a negative as part of their case in chief on the government. I suggest to Your Honor that the evidence that has been presented in this case is overwhelming, that this young woman was clearly and unequivocally suffering from a mental disease or defect, that it was occupying her waking hours, her life, that she considered all of her avenues. She attempted to go to these health care providers, using the term loosely, that she went to these people. She had medication after medication after medication. She was obviously acting, I suggest to the court, in a state that was observed by witnesses that, in fact, that she was suffering from mental disease or defect, and then ultimately this horrific incident. So under that Brunette Silvera case, there's no evidence, I suggest, from the government that would rebut the fact that there is evidence of lack of criminal responsibility. So under Brunette Silvera and the cases that were cited in that opinion, respectfully, I would suggest that a required finding of not guilty should be entered on the case. I also would argue to the court that I think that under the Brunette Silvera standard and the evidence that Your Honor has before you, that the matter should be reduced down, if you will, from premeditated malice of forethought, cruelty, and atrocity to second degree. I'm not arguing at this stage Commonwealth versus Gray or any of its progeny as to manslaughter, but I think the court, certainly in its wise exercise of discretion, has the ability and the right to reduce the charge to second-degree murder or enter a required finding.
All right, counsel, thank you. Come on.
Kevin Reddington gets up and argues for Lindsay Clancy to be found not guilty, that there's not enough evidence to prove their case.
Thank you, Your Honor. The case that defense counsel cited, there was a presentation of the Commonwealth's evidence. Commonwealth rested. Defense called an expert who said that the defendant was not criminally responsible, and the Commonwealth relied on a cross-examination of that witness and did not call any further witnesses. So the motion was filed for a required finding at the close of all of the evidence, which is what's required under Commonwealth versus Dawson, which Brunette Silva cites and is still good law. An SJC case, 475 Mass 806, from 2016, in which the court says that a motion for required finding of not guilty by reason of lack of criminal responsibility may only be brought at the close of all of the evidence, not at the close of the Commonwealth's case. In this case, as you're aware, defense plans on presenting experts who testified that the defendant was not criminally responsible, and then the Commonwealth will have a rebuttal case with their own experts. So I think the time and place for the motion would be at the close of all of the evidence and not now.
All right.
That, of course, is denied as per usual.
I had an opportunity to take a look at Brunette Silvera. Based on that and based on the standard as described that I have to apply at this point, I'm going to deny the defendant's motion.
And then we begin with the defense's case. And immediately, it's intense. The first witness is a delivery room nurse who had known Lindsay for the entirety of Lindsay's career, worked with her at Mass General during the night shift, during COVID, gotten very close to her.
Do you know Lindsay?
I do.
How do you know her?
I was working on the labor floor when Lindsay first started with us.
So this would be the labor and delivery floor, and she started as a nurse, correct?
Correct.
Who had already been working there?
Correct.
And she was about, what, 24 years old?
Roughly.
And came in as a young woman as a nurse, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us, to your well, let me ask you this, how many years did you work with her?
She started, I believe, in 2015, and I worked until 2002 when she went out with Callan.
About 7 years or thereabouts.
Lindsay was often emotional during birth of complete strangers. She would cry and she would just say that was so beautiful. You could just tell that she really loved being in that setting.
Over those years, right up until the time of Callan being born, fair to say that you stayed friendly with her?
Yes.
You can't even make it up how bad these lawyers are. I can't even, you can't even make up how bad they are, how bad this showing actually is until you see what happens here.
And you're still friendly with her?
Yes. So Lindsay and I worked the night shift together, and often on the night shift you get to have an opportunity to really get to know your coworkers and celebrate things that are happening in their lives or support them with things that are not going so well. Lindsay asked a lot of questions of her coworkers about parenting. Simple things as she would poll the nursing staff about monogrammed lunch boxes, right down to sleeping habits. What questions do you ask a daycare provider to make sure that you're in the right place? She was often asking her coworkers childcare, parenting tips. Lindsay often checked in on her kids while they were sleeping at night. Again, we worked the night shift, and she had the ability to look at her phone and see what Cora or Callan were doing in their cribs, and she shared that with a lot of us. There was one particular night that Cora was crying. She was probably about 6 months old, and Lindsay never let Cora cry. She wasn't at that point in parenting, and she was very communicative about that. And Cora was crying on the monitor. It was the middle of the night, and maybe after 10 minutes, she started to call Pat, and he wasn't answering. And she got really worried that Cora was crying, but now Pat wasn't answering his phone. So in the middle of the night, she called the police to do a wellness check on her family.
Reddington is done. He's walked away. And then Ms. Buckingham gets up and decides, under cross-examination, to try to point out that Lindsay would have been particularly savvy about mental health and mental health medications because of her job as a nurse in the delivery room.
All right, Como?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the incident that you just told us about where Ms. Clancy was watching the monitor overnight, you were aware that the police responded and everything was fine, right?
Yes.
And you worked with her through 2022 when she went out with Levon Callan?
Correct.
And you never visited their house after Callan was born, did you?
No.
You don't know what was going on in her life, did you?
No.
And she didn't share any of her struggles with you via text or in any other capacity, did she?
No.
And as a labor and delivery nurse, and having been trained in labor and delivery, and you said you worked obstetrics before, correct?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that you often have patients that come to you in both those areas that have some mental illness or are on psychiatric medications, right?
Sometimes.
And working labor and delivery, you have some training on how to handle patients that are on certain types of medications, right?
Limited training, yes.
Well, it affects how you're going to go through a birth plan or do a delivery if a person is on some sort of long-term medication, right?
Right.
And so you're aware that Zoloft is something that's deemed safe for pregnant moms and breastfeeding moms?
Yes.
And you've had patients that have dealt with bipolar issues before?
Yes.
And that they have to remain medication compliant in order to manage those things, right?
Yes.
And because of that line of questioning, Kevin Reddington gets to stand back up and have this exchange with Lindsay's coworker of many years.
Ms. Brayton?
So your experience dealing with patients that have birthed a child, as the district attorney asked, and are on Zoloft and expressing issues of being a parent, were you aware of any incidents where Lindsay was with you and a woman did in fact express concern that she wanted to hurt herself or her child?
There was a particular patient that Lindsay was on staff when this patient arrived. It was a patient that arrived to the unit that had plans to harm herself while she was pregnant. And we had a conversation. Lindsay was brand new. It was the summer that she had just started. And we had a conversation about mental health in pregnancy and postpartum. And I asked her if she had ever heard of the Andrea Yates case, and she hadn't. And I explained that to her, and she cried. And she said, "How could a mother hurt her children?"
Thank you. All set.
Thank you.
Como?
No.
All right, let me sit down, thank you.
One of maybe the most powerful moments, arguably, in the entire case so far, which we have Lindsey Buckingham to thank. But when I go back through all of the witnesses throughout this trial who were really handled the most poorly, it's her co-counsel, Jennifer Spray, who I actually think is the worst lawyer I have ever seen. Ever. And perhaps it's that very horrible, childish voice, but more so, it's how she does not ever change the way she is questioning witnesses, regardless of who she's speaking to.
Como?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Now, when Lindsay was at McLean Hospital and she was discharged, did she tell you that she asked to be discharged early to go to Cora's birthday party?
I can't recall.
And do you recall speaking to the police on January 25th, just a day after this all happened back in 2023?
Yes.
And do you recall telling them that you saw Lindsay 2 weeks prior to the 24th, roughly around the birthday party time, and that she seemed okay?
Yes.
Do you recall telling the police that you spoke to her in phone calls many times after she was discharged to McLean, and that her tone of voice in those calls seemed better?
I did not speak to her on the phone. Most of our communication was via text.
So you don't recall saying that to the police, that the tone of Lindsay's voice in our phone conversations was better the last couple weeks since she had been released from the hospital?
I believe when I said that, I meant her tone via her text messages.
And so her tone in her text messages was better?
A bit.
And do you recall telling police that you spoke to Lindsay on Thursday, January 19th, 2023, and she seemed okay?
Yes.
And that was a phone call, correct?
That was text message.
Text message, okay.
Yes.
So when you were saying spoke to the police, you were referring to text messages?
Correct.
And so in that text message, she seemed fine?
She seemed okay.
So she had just been released from McLean Hospital at the beginning of January, and all of your communications after the birthday party were text messages, is that correct?
I think the date's wrong.
I believe so, yes.
And just so we make sure we have the date correct, after she was discharged from McLean in January of 2023, up until January 24th, 2023, all of your communications were via text.
Yes.
And these are not baby prosecutors. These women have been working for almost 2 decades or more in the prosecutor's office. And you can see what the district attorney was probably thinking, electing to go with these two. He's got to be thinking, oh, what is showing? We'll have our 2 female ADAs taking on the case, and that'll be good for us because 2 women going up against this woman will take the gender thing out of the equation. Not calculating, however, unsurprisingly, that could perhaps backfire because they are women. Because if it's a man who's doing the questioning and comes across as maybe cold or unempathic or unsympathetic, we could just all say, well, he's a man. What does he know about postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis? We could sort of give it a pass, not make it personal. But because these 2 are women who undoubtedly should know better in all of our minds, who undoubtedly should know when we are talking to a grandparent who did nothing wrong but love her daughter and grandchildren, or a sister who did nothing wrong, or a husband who did nothing wrong, that you could, let's say, for example, start off evidencing some grace, some integrity, some careful consideration of the situation by saying, first, I am so sorry for your loss. But these 2 are the most tone deaf, incompetent, inept, childish almost prosecutors who are being so outsmarted in that room over and over and over again that we all just assume that this is their first year out of law school, because that's the way it feels. And I am sure that what has happened here, I'm sure of it, they were going to go with the malingering defense. Lindsay Clancy is faking.
My theory is the prosecutors, number one, didn't prep this case very well. Number 2, the prosecutors believe that this case on a strictly evidentiary mental health basis is a loser. And they feel they're going to win this case strictly on the emotion of the fact that there are 3 dead children.
After they found that note where it said, it's almost as though my body is trying to produce an illness so that I can get a break from being the caregiver to everybody, they saw that and they said, oh, aha, we're going to run with it and we're going to put on a malingering defense. We're going to show you how she was so savvy to mental health stuff or to medicine that she faked a mental illness so that she could M her children and get away with it because she was just sick of being a mom. I have to believe that these two are not parents. I'm just going to believe that, whether it's true or not, because it is more terrifying for me to think that these might be moms to someone. So I'm just going to elect to not look into whether they are someone's mother. I'm going to just pretend they aren't. There's no doubt that was their case. And then they saw that there was a backlash, that there were people like us saying things that were not so favorable about them and about their approach. So they elected to pretend midway through that that's not their defense. That's why it appears as though the prosecution is making the defense's case for them. Because they're trying to say that Lindsay Clancy is Googling hallucinations because she knows she has to fake it. But the thing that is just so obvious, if you're in my shoes, if you're a mental health professional who's spent, every day for the last 27 years working with other human beings with mental health issues, number one, Lindsay Clancy has always struggled with anxiety, but it went unacknowledged. Very obviously. Number two, she's not done well in the last few pregnancies, and probably not after Cora either. But it was given different names, like a traumatic birth, or like the baby blues after Dawson. And then Dawson was kind of a difficult baby. So that's what it was all being attributed to. She's just struggling because of X, Y, or Z, which is exactly the same pattern that we're hearing from Lindsay and Patrick while this is all unfolding. Mom, however, and sister and friend of Lindsay are beginning to finally help this to all make sense in exactly the way I have been saying from the very start. From the very, very start. And we have confirmation of what I discovered and reported to you guys over the last few days. On my Wednesday night live, I'm going to go through all of it with you bit by bit. But because I have been actually carefully tracking, and it is not easy to do, I have had to go through every word of the entirety of these mental health professionals' testimonies multiple times to be able to accurately discern what was prescribed, in what dose, and not only what was prescribed, but then what Lindsay Clancy actually reported, whether she took these medicines or not, and when and at what dose. It is extremely difficult to suss all of this out. There's a tremendous number of medicines, but then there's Lindsay not taking the medications, not only sometimes at all, but also then not as prescribed. And then sometimes she adds stuff. So it has been a cluster F to figure out what is going on here. But one thing that jumped off the page at me right away in going through this exercise, Lindsay Clancy on December 1st, something spooks her.
Can you tell us what you observed about her around the holiday season as it related to her, from your observations and your texting and your communications with Lindsay? How did she appear to you at that point?
The beginning of December, it seemed like she very much decompensated. I do remember her saying at one point at the beginning of December, something along the lines of, I'm in a really tough spot. And knowing what she had shared with me previously about how her mental health had been struggling, I had this gut feeling that something was off and that she was really struggling, and I asked her if she was safe.
What did she say?
She said yes at that point.
So it turns out this is the exact time when the family reports something serious happens. And of course, because that's exactly what we're seeing with the professionals. This is when she shows up at Tufts' office after not having seen her or telling her that she's going to transfer her care to South Shore Hospital or the South Shore providers. She shows up in Tufts' office and says she's worried about having suicidal ideations. Now, anyone who has half a brain understands quite clearly what that actually means and understands that Lindsay Clancy is an anxious person, understands that she is a professional who cares to a high degree about what other people think. And yes, thank God we are getting verification of that from all of her family members so far.
And you knew her husband, Pat.
Yes.
And you knew the kids?
Yes.
Obviously. Do you recall around Christmas itself, and perhaps a little bit thereafter, that you spoke with her and that she indicated, basically, I'm not doing okay?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what you observed about her demeanor or her symptomology when you said she was decompensating around that time? What were they symptoms in your mind of?
Based on communication with Lindsay, and I started communicating with Pat directly at that time, she was reporting her mood was worsening, as she described as depression. She was having more suicidal thoughts. Insomnia continued to be an issue. She was really not feeling like herself.
Something obviously spooks her. She has 4 mental health professional appointments, and including her PCP doctor, an appointment with their doctor. She has 4 appointments in 24 hours starting on December 1st. An appointment with a therapist in Letitia Dukes. She calls her mom and her sister and is alarmed. They are also validating the severity of these intrusive thoughts.
At the end of December, so I think it was more along the same of, that she is really not feeling well. Her mood is down. She's feeling numb. She's feeling hopeless. I believe at the very end of the month, she told me she had had suicidal ideation every day for a month.
Her sister tells us that, yep, she's had them the whole month of December. And wouldn't you know it, had any one of these mental health professionals asked to speak to the family members in this case, they would have heard how serious the situation was from somebody else who had much more knowledge of Lindsay Clancy and what the norm really was. And exactly the way her mother describes the situation is what I have been saying to you guys from day one, the entire time. This is not normal. Mom uses a very interesting and important word to describe what she sees in her very smart daughter, what she sees happening. She calls it paranoia.
It is the defense counselor's duty to protect the rights of the individual, as it is the prosecution's duty to uphold and defend the laws of the state. Justice for all. Only we have a problem here.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through eyes covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright.
This is me reminding you to like the video. Like this video. like the video, comment, subscribe.